Hello learners, today we are going to study or we are going to learn chapter 12 of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, that is offences by or relating to a public servant. First of all, we will understand that who is a public servant. We will take a basic idea of public servant. Public servant is a person actually who works for the government or who works for the public and who is responsible for serving in the public honestly. So, public servant is a person who works for the public honest. For example, public servant will include all the government employees, all the government teachers, public officers, judges, teachers in the government schools, teachers in the government um, universities, panchayat officers in panchayats, officers in municipalities, railway staff, government doctors, elections officers, and employees of government companies also. So, public servant is a position or a post of a public trust, and people actually expect them to fairly or to do their job fairly and honestly and responsibly. So, who is a public servant? A public servant is can be any person who work for the government, or he is paid by the government obviously, or acting on a government duty will be known as public servant, and he has the responsibility to serve the public. Now, question is that why is public servant is important? Why, what is the position of public servant and why this position of public servant important? Because they implement, actually public servants implements the law which are made by the legislature, which are made by any local or legal authority or law making authority. The work of the public servant is to implement that law. We can also say that public servant maintain the public order in the public. They provide services, for example, like education, health, and security. They manages all the government funds. They make decisions regarding the which affect the citizens. They help in delivering welfare activities. So the role of the public servant, we can say that, is a very important in public in the democracy of India. So if the public, what happens if the public servant behave very wrongfully? The system will collapse. So public servant is a very important part of system. So there are various roles of public servant. We can say that they maintain law and order in the society, in the public. They provide funds. They protect the citizens' right. They use government money. They ensure fairness in the administrations. They work without corruptions, and they serve public without any discrimination. So this chapter, like chapter 12, offences by or relating to public servants, actually covers the offences committed by public servants. But before going to the offences committed by the public servant, we should understand that what are the expectations from a public servant. So there are some expectations from the public servants with the public expect that particular public servant will do. For example, public expect honesty from the public servant. The public expect transparency from the public servant. They expect the accountability from the public servant. They expect that they will take no bribery. They expect that they will never misuse the power. They expect that equal treatment will be given by the public servant to all. So they also expect a loyalty to the constitution. So that is why the public servant actually takes a it's a hold a very special position. So the law puts strict rules to them. Why Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita has created a separate chapter on public servant and in that is called as chapter 12, because the crimes by the public servants are more serious than by an ordinary or normal crimes. Yes, The crimes by the public servants are very serious than any normal crimes. For example, if any public servant is taking bribery, it will affect the whole citizens. It will affect the um, uh, public. If he is misusing the position, that will also be a serious matter. And if he causing a loss of the government fund, that will also be a very serious matter. So if he is not performing any official duty, it will also be a serious matter. If he is not misusing a government documents, that will also be a serious matter. So the position of a public servant is a very special and is a very special one. And this actually affects the society entirely and not just a one person. So that is why the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita had made strict punishment also for the offense done by the public servants. So uh, they so we can say that there is a difference between public servant and a private employee. Public servant actually works for the government, and a employee is actually work for the private company, pay and public servant paid by from the public authorities, and private employee paid by the private employer, and they actually serves the citizens of the country, and they serves the business of the company. And there are stricter laws for the public servants, while there are very liberal and general laws for the private employees. So there is a difference between public servants and private there is a difference between public servants and private employees. That is why there is a strict rule for the public servants. Let's take an example. For example, there is a police constable, and he keeps the law and order. Government school teachers, he teach children. Government university professor, they teach the higher education. And there are tehsildar, patwaris. They actually maintain the land records. There are government doctors who provide treatments in the hospitals. The block departmental officers, they actually make schemes in the villages. And there are judges and railways, TTE. So these all are the public servants. If they will not perform their duty very well in the society, or they will not perform their role very well, then the whole society will collapse. So in a very simple uh, way, we can say that public servant works for the government. Obviously, they use public money. So that is why there are some offenses which are covered by the chapter 12 of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. For example, there's offenses committed by public servants like disobedience of law, misconduct, falsification of documents, unlawful trade, impersonification, and misuse of official symbols. First, Section 198 of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita deals with the disobeying law with the intent to cause injury. If any public servant knowingly disobeys legal direction regarding a conduct, means if there is any public servant who knows, and after knowing that he disobeys any legal directions regarding conduct, that will be covered under he will be covered under section 198. So there must be an intention, or there must be a knowledge likely to cause injury to a person. What is the punishment given for the disobeying the law with the intent to cause injury? The punishment will be a simple punishment that will be up to 1 year, or he can be punished with a fine, as we are saying this, or both. So punishment for disobeying law with the intent to cause injury will be very simple. For example, like let's take illustration. Officer who is failing to execute a court order property attachment causing loss to decree holder. So if any officer who is failed to execute court order for example, if court has order to attach property and which is causing loss to a decree holder, and a particular public officer failed to execute that court order, he will be covered under this section. Means he is disobeying the law with the intent to cause injury. So there are some responsibilities, or we can say that duties of a public servant. So there are many, actually the public servant is work for the people and paid through the public money. So it is the responsibility, or it is the duty of a public servant, that he should work for the public honestly, he should work for the public fairly, he should work for the public very very honestly. So honesty and integrity and fairness are the responsibilities of the public servant. Next, section 199 deals with disobeying directions under the law. Means any public servant disobeys laws prohibiting legal attendance of any person during investigation. If any, for example, if any public servant who is actually disobeying the law, which is prohibiting illegal attendance of any person, will be covered during investigation, will be covered by that uh, this section 190. Second, disobeying, if any public servants disobey any legal directions regarding investigation and harming someone. So if any public servant disobey any legal direction can be regarding any investigation, it can be regarding any harming someone, that will also be covered under this section. If any public servant fails to record FIR, means if any, it is the duty of a public servant, police officer, to record an FIR, for example, for serious cognizable offence, and if he fails to do that, he will also be covered under the section 199, because he is disobeying the directions under the law. What will be the punishment for the disobeying the directions in the law for the public servant? He will be punished rigorously, means there is a rigorous imprisonment for 6 months, that can be up to 2 years, and plus fine, means there will be both the imprisonment or fine. So we have covered two offences that is will be done by the public servant. First is disobeying the law with the intent to cause injury, means the intention is to cause injury, or the knowledge likely to cause injury, that will covered under section 198. Second, if any public servant disobeys the directions under the law, means if the law has given a particular directions, and any public servant disobeys that directions under any law, he will be covered under section 190. So next, before going to next section, that is section 200, which is punishment for non-treatment of a victim, let's also understand some more responsibility of a public servant. For example, the public servant should not be the person of bias, means there should not be a biasness element in the services by the public servant. For example, he should not be a caste bias, he should not be a religious bias, he should not have any political pressure, there should be no personal discrimination, and he should follow the law. From the above, from this offense under section 198 and 199, we understand that public servant should follow the law, because if he will not follow the law, he will be covered under section 198, or in section 199. So this is also the duty of the public servant, to follow the law, to follow the rules, to follow the government orders, to follow the orders of the court, to follow the orders of the judgment, and to also implement the orders of the courts, governments, and other higher authority. Okay, so this is also the responsibility of public servants. Now we will come to the punishment for non-treatment of victim. Means this actually section applies to the in charge of any hospital, whether it is a private hospital or a public hospital. So he will it will applies to the hospitals authorities. If he contravenes, means if any public authority contravenes the section 199 of Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, that is a mandatory emergency treatment, then he will be punished up to 1 year or fine or both. Means the person will will either get imprisonment for 1 year, or he will also he can also get the punishment, or he can get both imprisonment and punishment. Next, section 201 means incorrect document by public servant. What is this means that incorrect? What is this section try to say about the incorrect document by public servant? Means if any public servant prepares, translate document in the form of e-records, he will be covered under that section. And he also must know or believe that it is incorrect. So if any public servant is preparing or translating any document or e-records, after knowing or after believing that it is incorrect, he will be covered under this section 201. So there must be an intention of the public servant, or he must have knowledge that it is likely to cause injury. Why? What is the punishment given for this offense? The punishment is up to 3 years or fine or with both. Means the person can be punished for the imprisonment up to 3 years, he can be punished for the fine, or he can be punished with both imprisonment or fine. Now next come to the next section 202, unlawful trade by public servant. Then before going through this section, we will also know one more responsibility of public servant. So unlawful trade by public servants. So any public servant, if he illegally prohibited from trade, engages in trade, then he will be covered under this section 202, and the punishment will be very simple, that will be up to 1 year or fine or both, or he can also be punished with a community service. As we know that this community service punishment is provided under the chapter punishment. It is a new addition or the updation or the reformation in the chapter of punishment, in which the person is sent to the public and he will provide the community service freely and with heartily. So what is the purpose of this section 202? This section actually ensures neutrality. This section actually ensures the transparency and public office. Public office, the public servant will not be um, allowed to engages in any trade activities which are prohibited by law. Only the legally trade activities will be done, can be done by the public servants. So section 202 is for the public servants who are dealing in unlawful trade, and which is prohibited by the any legal authority. In next section, that is section 203, this section actually made for the public servants who unlawfully buy or bid for the property. So what this section says? This section says actually public servant it prohibits actually public servant for any purchasing or bidding for certain property. Means their public servant can't buy some or buy some purchase. Public servant can't purchase or buy for certain property. Offense, if the this section also says that if the offense is done in the name of another's names or in with other persons jointly, then he will also be covered under this section. After this, what is the punishment of this offense? The punishment will be up to 2 years or fine or with both. So so public servant is not allowed to purchase or bid for certain kinds of property. What will happen if he purchases the property? The property will be confiscated. Section 204, it's a personating a public servant. Personating means that pretending to be a public, if someone's pretend to be a public office, or someone pretend to be a public officer. If so, if someone pretend to hold a public office, or in someone impersonating a public servant, then he will covered be he will doing he will do the offense of personating a public offense, and doing or attempting to do any act under assumed authority. Means if any public servant do or attempt to do any assumed authority, he will also be covered under this section. What is the punishment of this personating a public servant? The punishment will be 6 months to 3 years imprisonment or fine. Means both the imprisonment or the fine will be given. So again, let's come to the one of the responsibility of public servant or duty of the public servant, that there is also a duty that public servant is a position, hold the position of public trust. It is a duty of the public servant to maintain this public trust. Means it is a duty of the public servant to maintain the public accounts very well. It is a duty of the public servant to maintain public funds very well. So uh, if he is not able to protect the public trust in official duty, then this section will be uh, this section will then he will be covered under this section. Next, section 205 of which covers bearing up and token of public servant. If anyone who wears uniform or who wears token resembling that of a public servant, he will be covered under these sections. So anyone is not allowed to wear any uh, uh, token resembling public servants. For example, not an ordinary person is not allowed to wear a police officer's uniform or any uniform belonging to a public servant. So there must also be an intention. What should be the intention or of that person, or there should be an intention that uh, intention of a person who is wearing a uniform or token, that he makes the person to believe that he belongs to a particular. Means many persons are there who try to make other persons to believe that he belongs to a particular class. For example, he belongs to a police officer, he belongs to that judge, he belongs to this. So they are all these sections actually mm, uh, this section is actually made for those person. What is the punishment? Punishment is the imprisonment for up to 3 months, very simple and a very short punishment, or a fine, or up to 5,000 rupees, or both. Means imprisonment or fine, both can be imposed. Thank you.